kids would end a movie right when I needed to start getting on, and that always works out.
We should have everybody in. Uh, hey, welcome everybody. We're Team Bad Decisions. I'm Brandon, and I'm joined today with a good friend Eric, the highly competitive gamer and winner of Michigan GT, multiple of them.
No, just one.
Just one, but
Yeah, I've gotten top three twice and second once.
gotcha. Okay, so you're still pretty
I'm up there.
yeah, pretty up there.
Just not a
Um,
finisher.
oh, you're good. I won't judge you if you don't judge me. So we're looking at evaluating lists based and bringing the good list to the right event based on mission selections and mission packets. So a lot of big events like Adepticon release their mission packets early. Would you say, I don't know, a couple months in advance maybe you may have these?
Yeah, they started posting them up. I believe end of December is when they started posting, and they'll tweak them throughout as people test play them if there's any issues.
So for an event, that's for anybody who's not aware, that event is usually in, I don't know, you said February, March. So you would have
Uh,
like
yeah, you get normally most of the larger events you'll get your stuff at about 2 months in advance.
2 months in advance. So you have time to build a list and then potentially play test said list for a little while before
Yeah,
the event
paint,
comes in.
add things to it. Yeah, and paint and add. That's the big thing.
So uh just on a general, before we crack down into specific mission specifics, what would you look at, or what's the first things you look for when you look at any of these packets? The general information.
So it's all about what kind of restrictions they're going to have as far as detachments, whether or not you can have more than two battalions, uh, going as far as whether or not you can have more than two of any detachment. In that case, there's a lot of terms out there that say you're limited to two of one detachment. So you're allowed to take, say, two battalions and then an outrider, or you can take two brigades or whatnot, or two of anything and then one of something else.
Like, nothing sucks more than getting there and realizing that your whole list and
You're,
everything you brought is illegal.
yeah, you're cheating, but you didn't mean to cheat, but you didn't read.
Yeah.
So,
So
uh,
Yeah, keep
Yeah,
going. You're
that's
good.
probably one of the big ones to look at. Points values is big. There are several out there that are going to either smaller events just to throw things in. There was one recently, I believe it was in January, that was just 1850 instead of your standard 2000. I've also seen Buckeye battles go up to 2,500 points. So if you're not fully paying attention, you might show up with your generic 2,000 point list. You might be overpointed. You might be severely underpointed. So
Yeah.
those are the big things to look for.
Yeah, I also I personally like to look at the scoring rubric itself, knowing
That's big.
yeah, how much actually winning your games are going to be and that compared to painting, compared to display,
Yep.
especially if you're traveling, I don't know, upwards of a couple hours to on a flight. If I'm going to fly to Las Vegas from Michigan and the display board's not going to be worth anything, maybe I don't
Yes.
pack one, you know?
Yeah, and you don't need to bring in your highly golden demon painted army because their scoring rubric for painting is as long as you got three colors, you're good to play. Compared to stuff like the Michigan GT, where a third of your battle points or a third of your overall points are in your painting and soft scores. So that definitely plays a huge factor in there as well.
Yeah. And then for a soft score rubric, because the majority of this will be on, you know, Michigan's and points, but for a soft score rubric and for someone who essentially won their Michigan GT off their soft scores, I mean, I don't mean to offend, but your soft scores put you over the top.
I did. Yeah.
What do you look at in soft scores, and when you see that, whatever you say, how does that change your list for what you
I
bring?
so it makes me spend a lot more time on my models, more or less. Like you see, like for the Michigan GT, I think it was you get 150 points out of the 400 points allowed for uh, your soft scores. So what that included was things like, was your display board pretty? Did it have more than just dirt on it? Uh, did your bases have multiple components, not just sand or water? Did it have, say you're doing a water theme, did it have shells? Did it have, maybe a little bit of fish floating around on them? We had someone show up with that a couple years ago with a really pretty dark Eldar army. Um, they look at your blendings, whether or not it just looks like it's airbrush or you actually went through and made it a little bit better. That you have edge highlighting, that your eyes are picked out, squad markings, things like that. Whether it even be change the color of cloaks or changing the claws on your demonettes. I mean, there's a lot to take into it when you go in there if you're trying to maximize your points. And if it's a soft score based tournament, you really got to make sure you're getting those points in. Otherwise, you might table your opponents and get max points, but you fall short because you didn't add an edge highlight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Now from you know, we've all had that awkward moment where the judge is like reviewing the rubric in front of your army. Do you which camp do you reside in? Do you think there should be a lot of interaction between you and that judge on pointing out stuff, or do you think you should let the judge and ask questions if he has any?
I'm definitely on the fence on that. I've definitely seen where if you're too aggressive with some people, they back off. I think it definitely depends on whether or not you're getting an introvert or an extrovert judge. A lot of judges will sit down and chat with you, and there are a lot of judges, specifically in my opinion, at Adepticon, where they're on a time crunch and they don't have time to talk to you, and they're not fully knowing what they're all looking at. So it's nice to have even a cheat sheet for them. I've done that before, where hey, this model is this because it's not the normal model that you're playing with. Like I have a 100% customized Slanesh mask model. Couldn't tell the difference between the 120 demonettes I've ran before and her because they're the same size. But she's got a couple extra bits on her, a little bit bigger cloak. So it's things that get lost in your army. So having a small cheat sheet sometimes helps see the conversion work and the extra time you put into models.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Now, kind of transitioning into the meat and potatoes of our discussion today, it's going to be looking at lists or looking at missions, and then how different aspects of these missions will tool your list accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one we're going to be looking at Adepticon 2020's mission. So these actually weren't played by anyone, right? The Adepticon
No,
never happened.
no,
Um,
sadly.
yeah, that pour one out for the homies.
Yeah.
Uh, the old ways is mission one for the singles championship.
Yep.
So this mission is for around is a 2,000 point three or three I don't know what is those formation
Three
detachments,
detachments.
three
Yep.
detachments. Thank you. Um, and then the rule of three essentially.
Yes.
There's if there, do you happen to know if there's any Forge World restrictions on Adepticon stuff, or if there's any crazy things going
Uh,
on?
they kept changing it back and forth this year. I don't know what their final decision was on it.
Oh, do you notice that Forge World restrictions actually play a big impact on your high level games and singles?
No, they've made so with the Forge World and all that. Some of the points values have become so extreme that it's just they're just fun models nowadays. Like your Warlord Titan and all that. Yeah, 2,000 points, one model. Most armies can deal with one model, but it's having fun just to play around with them.
I agree. There's a lot of points. I do as an Eldar player kind of hate that the Phantom is like 2,200 points, just out of reach of using in or it's like it's a huge point value.
Yeah,
It's out of reach of using in any normal game.
yeah. So I just pulled up the whole Forge World stuff, and it says that they were allowing Forge World, but it had to be the actual model. You weren't allowed to have any kind of conversion work on it or proxies.
Oh, I agree 100% with the proxies, but conversion works a little rough, especially if you start with the whole real model and then you just add a
Add
little
some
bit.
stuff. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that's going maybe a little bit too overboard, but yeah, I definitely agree with no proxies. I mean, I shouldn't be running a wave serpent and throwing a random huge gun on it and calling it a warp hunter.
Yeah.
You know, so I
Well,
mean, it still should look what the play is supposed to be. There shouldn't have any questions.
so looking diving deep now into mission one, called the old ways. It's read the entire mission before setting up. Have you actually ever done that? Like usually I read these missions beforehand, like way beforehand. I don't think I've ever
Uh,
read the whole thing right before I set up.
no, I dissect these missions weeks in advance,
Yeah.
um, and then I'll also normally read them again as I'm getting ready for my game. So when they say, "Hey, dice down for let's go to round two," I'm already reading round two's mission while I'm having my lunch and moving on from there. That way, I'm 100% prepared and not forgetting things when I come to the table, because that's like the last thing you want to do is go, "Oh shoot, I forgot to take my secondaries. Oh man, I totally forgot to go for that last blood or whatnot in your tertiaries." So it's really important to know every rule aspect on it. Otherwise, you're not playing the right game that your opponent's playing.
I 100% agree. That pre-game, after you get up to the table, you should know the mission already. You should have
Yes.
practiced the mission, and then that at that time, it's reviewing your opponent's like war scroll sheet and figuring out how your terrain's going to be set up to maximize
Exactly.
your potential in the game. Because
Yep.
a very smart man told me very recently that uh, even more so than any movement phase or any other phase during the game, deployment and setting up terrain is about the most important thing you could do competitively in 40K.
That I did say. I think that is probably one of the most key functions of the game is knowing how to set up your terrain to maximize your army's effectiveness, whether it be blocking line of sight, whether it be putting a building in the way to block one of your opponent's super heavies from getting through. Uh, you know, it's kind of comical when you position stuff and your opponent all of a sudden can't play his most expensive model. I mean, yeah, you might feel badsy for him, but He's the one who brought it, and you just outplayed him a little.
Yeah.
So there's definitely um, reasons on why to know how terrain works and the functionality of it.
Yeah, because ruins, the only thing that can move through a ruin is what, beasts and infantry? Or anything with fly?
Uh, no, it's just infantry and units with fly.
Ooh, even beasts can't move.
Yeah, beasts have to go around.
I've actually played that wrong. Then I've allowed some beast models to walk through walls and stuff.
Yeah, no, none of that can go through walls. So it's got to have the infantry keyword. And there might be some beasts out there that have the infantry keyword. I don't know any of them off the top of my head, but I don't know everybody's rules. There's too many to know.
So, it just came in out of chat. Laughing Jester posted that a lot of tournaments that he's playing in actually don't allow you to move the terrain.
Those are
Uh,
ITC missions. Yeah, when those are the ones that are have preset up terrain, which is great in my opinion because they are well rounded in that way. You're going to have your two large line of sight blocking pieces of terrain right in the center. You're going to have some smaller line of sight blocking terrain in some of the alleyways. And you're going to have a couple either ruins or big tree things in the other corners. So it gives you some cover, but you're able to use a lot of the line of sight blocking. And they're calling the line of sight blocking in the middle ruin, so your infantry models can go through the wall instead of just having to go around, which is huge.
and ITC missions, I do agree that they're very standard, which makes them very easy to plan around and plan your lists around. But
Yes.
do you think that the ITC mission boards are some of the more open boards that I've played on compared to Michigan GT, which has significantly more terrain, or even Buckeye Battles, which has a lot of terrain on the boards?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with where people can store the terrain. Because I mean, at the end of the day, all these pieces of terrain get put into boxes and stored somewhere, whether it be at somebody's house. We've actually got someone on the Michigan GT who we use as garage, uh, and there's places that have rent out whole storage blocks, and those can get expensive too. So that's mainly whether or not you can keep things small, and how much revenue you're trying to make so you can uh, continue your tournament.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. But looking deepen into the first step, the mission, the old ways, deployment. So it's the modified pitch battle, and with primary objectives, 5 total. During step 2, using any 5 objective markers, place the objectives in accordance with the diagram below. The diagram, basically, mission 1, hard placed objective markers, and the chevron kind of not hammer and anvil, but the chevron uh, deployment, long edge deployment.
Yeah, you're talking the long edge um, arrowhead deployment style. I can't think of what it's called. Um, but yeah, they have their objectives are just out. All the objectives are outside the deployment zones, which means models have to move. Which I'm all for models having to move. Um, and it's nice to not have to worry about uh, play against a guard army who gets the benefit of playing 3 objectives and you only get 2. So they're automatically at an advantage. So these missions for Adepticon are very even. Like so, I believe all the missions have preset up objectives for the first 4 missions
I'm
that
ch-
we know.
I'm checking them, and it does look to be the case that all objectives are pre-set up, and that uh, at all times, at least a third, or as small as a third, as most as all of them, are outside of deployment zones. That 2 of these
Yes.
3 missions have objectives mostly out of your deployment zone. Now, how does that go factor into your list building then?
At that point, with things normally with the way people place their line of sight blocking terrain and their big ruins and all that, a lot of those things aren't in the corners. So the main thing you got to do is if you're going to grab an objective, you either have to have something that's aggressive that people are going to be shooting at or worrying about. So your little 10-man cultist squads or gaunts or whatever can just hang out on an objective and hold it and not get shot off. Or you've got to have something that's resilient and can take the punishment and keep ticking for the next turn. So there's, I think a lot of it has to do with how you want to synergize your build, and I think there's multiple ways of going around it depending on the style.
Yeah. And to go along with it, the primary objective or holding the objective markers on the board doesn't start until round 2, which is something
Yep.
that jumps out at me, and goes from round 2 to 5. I don't think Adepticon gives you max points for tabling.
No, I don't believe they do either. I think there's a bonus at the end depending on what round you table your opponent. It's like a multiplier.
Gotcha. And
Like you
I
get an extra 3 points, and then if you table them turn 3, you would times it by 3 or whatnot.
and I would actually look at what the possible scoring is with primary and secondary objectives for each round compared to what that multiplier would be. Because sometimes, I mean, it's kind of a, not a great move, but it's understandable when you're playing at this caliber of event that you leave your opponent alive.
Yeah, most times you want to. It's definitely worth not tabling your opponent, or if you're playing that kind of game, um, where you're just taking it to them. Where turn 3, they've got maybe 6 models left, and instead of you taking your whole turn and ignoring them and then letting them move their 6 models, just talking it out. Like, hey man, let's go let's go to lunch early. Let's go grab a drink and go to the bathroom or whatnot and relax instead of continuing the torture for the next hour.
Yeah, and that's important too. Is that knowing that your opponent is a person and they have
Yeah.
feelings, and you don't want to just slowly squeegee the dry erase eraser
Yeah.
over them.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's hard to get. It's painful to get tabled. I'm sure we've all been there, but it's also even more extreme when you're getting tabled and that person pulls back. So, and then it's just like, man, I gotta go through this for another 2 hours and listen to you talk. I'm like, I'd much rather have a talk over uh, sitting down and hanging out with my friends or hanging out with the person I just played with and going, what did I do wrong? What can I do to change? Was it the list? Was it setup? Did I make some huge mistake during my movement phase that just left me out in the open?
yeah,
So I'm learning from your experiences that way.
yeah. So, looking at the primary objectives, or the objectives that are on the table, it looks like you can score a maximum of 6 per turn or 24 per battle, which per battle round turns out to be 6 per
6 turns. Yep. So
everyone.
yeah, 4 turns,
You
and yes.
you get 1 for holding 1, you get
Yep.
2 for holding 2 or more, and you hold 3 for holding more than your opponent. So, what jumps out to me is that my list only really needs to hold. It's one of two things. It needs to hold a massive amount of objectives, which would be a horde list. So you're guaranteeing the more than your opponent, because more than your opponent is half of this scoring. Or it needs to hold 2 and then shoot my opponent off everything but 1.
Yeah. What's nice about these is the way it's worded is you score at the beginning of your turn, so it allows your opponents to react to what you did. So say I'm going second, you're going first, you move up the board, turn 1, you grab the center objective. So you're already at an advantage coming to the beginning of your turn. Now I've got to take you off of that. So it's not like at the end of your turn, score your points as you were. So it allows your opponent to react as well. And with these, it looks like all 4 of these missions only have, no, some of them do have 6 objectives, but most of them only have 5. So yeah, 3 out of the 4 have 5. One of them has 6. So it makes it so um, someone, if you're going for the whole 2 or more, you're probably getting the full 6 points for holding more than your opponent as well.
Yes. Uh, but you don't score at turn one, right?
You don't
So
score turn one.
so if you did go first turn one and you took a bunch of objectives and they shot you off of them, it does put you at a very reactionary gameplay if you're going turn two or going second. But what would you think? Do you think actually going second in this game and being able to be reactionary is better, or do you think going first?
So this game has kind of turned into an Alpha Strike army or Alpha Strike game. So normally whoever has first turn normally some is going to have the advantage unless you played terrain right, you're playing stuff where you can hide things correctly. You've got something like say Alpha Legion Possessed where they can take a ton of damage and still be ticking halfway through the game. Um, there's a lot that I think revolves around it. And with the Adepticon ones, there's actually a benefit to going second because they give you at the end of the game more victory points for the objectives you hold.
Yeah,
So I think it was an additional 3 that you could get. So I
yes.
mean that's a game changer. I mean 3 points is 6 point swing when you're playing differential. So that's a huge difference in points.
Now, do you see a lot of competitive games and with one of the players still having models on the board though? I'd say like at this level of play, usually they cascade to a point where one person it doesn't have anything left at the end of the game.
So the Michigan GT last year I put it was 5 rounds. I think out of the 5 rounds, uh, every opponent that I had, even though I got max score on what was it? I think I got max score on 3, almost max on a fourth, and I lost one of my games. Um, but the only time I ever saw somebody with no models was the time I lost. I mean, the other time, every time else, my opponent at least had, I would say, 15 to 20% left of their forces. So I mean,
Oh,
I was playing more of a uh, game of having characters being a target and letting my small squads grabbing objectives. So the Michigan GT is all about Maelstrom cards. They use Maelstrom there. So you've got to not only be able to kill things in the shooting phase or kill things in shooting and assault and psychic because there's cards in there that does psychic as well. You've got to hold all the objectives. So it's not like you can just play an army that just is pure running down their throat and uh, can't take a unit and relieve them to go and grab an objective. So it's
now
yeah, it's just the way it is.
an Adepticon, that's not a Maelstrom card tournament.
No, no, Adepticon. They have done Maelstrom there before. Um, they they used to do it, but then there was a lot of complaints of how random the cards are, how it's luck of the draw. You could play a game, uh, depending on some of the missions back in sixth and seventh when the cards first came out, where you weren't doing anything for a whole game because you had to discard cards as you went. You draw, you had your 5 cards and you can only discard one, and you couldn't claim your cards at the beginning. You're not going to claim them at all throughout the entire game, and while your opponent's just racking up points. So there's definitely a reason to not play cards. I like cards, but I definitely see the reason as a competitive player to not have Maelstrom in a competitive play.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, what would from a list building perspective, what changed with your Michigan GT list compared to what you would bring for a non-card list?
It for my the Slanesh that I brought to the Michigan GT, um, I don't know what all I would have changed with it. Um, I probably would have gotten rid of a couple of the characters like Celeste. I didn't need that many powerhouse models to soak up wounds and uh, throw them out there. I'd probably run more seekers, something fast. Um, the list that I was actually working on, if I was going to be playing in the championship, was a mix between Alpha Legion and Emperor's Children, taking the possessed and Emperor's Children and then having a big 20-man blob of Noise Marines in Alpha Legion that could never be shot at. So there's you gotta with Adepticon with having to hold objectives and making sure your models are staying. You've got to have units that either can't be shot at, which Alpha Legion are known to do that with conceal stratagem, uh, and you've got to have a big unit that can take a lot of punishment, hanging out in the middle, saying, "If you want this objective, come take it from me, but you're gonna have to put a ton of your force into killing that unit." And there's a good chance it still is going to be there at the end of your shooting an assault turn for 1 or 2 turns.
Yeah, and 1 or 2 turns may be most
It's
of the
game
game.
changing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's game changing.
because out of your Adepticon experience, how many turns does your average game go before you hit a
Uh,
point where you're calling it? You know?
so I've seen games only go 2 turns at Adepticon, which is really sad in my opinion. But most of my games that I've ever played, and that's in any tournament, I'm playing minimum 5 turns. I push for 5 turns, and I'm not running lists that are small. I'm known for, um, seventh edition. I played the Cabal Star, which took a lot of psychic dice, a lot of turns or stuff in psychic. But I also knew that with that, I needed to cut back on other things, so I didn't have anything to shot. So I had no shooting. I stuck with assault or psychic and close combat, and that was my army. So I mitigate the effect of having to move multiple huge units. Uh, the uh, the fact that your one of your phases is normally going to take longer than the other, like mine is the combat phase. So I got rid of one of the phases, so I didn't have to ever deal with it and feel like I was slowing down the gameplay.
Yeah.
I think that's huge in a game. If you can figure out a way to effectively cut out a part of the sequence of the turn, you're going to have more time on your hands.
Yeah. I've also heard this from other like highly competitive players that I've talked to. Is out of the 4 missions that were published, they're going to review and base their list around mission 1 the least, because that's the most random opponent setup. And as you go, if you win your first game, then you're going to be placed against winners and even more winners if you win the second game. And you really want your list to be tailored, they say, around mission 4 and mission 3, because if you get to that point with 2 wins already, you're going to be playing other high caliber players, and you want a
Yeah,
high caliber list tooled towards those high caliber missions.
yeah, I 100% agree with that. When you start bracketing off with your wins and losses, the the more wins you have, the harder the opponents are going to be, and that's a very truthful when it comes to any tournament or any game or sport at that point. And yeah, it's more important to worry about mid game and end game than the beginning, if that makes sense, as far as tournament wise.
Yeah. And like no matter how finely tuned your list can get, there's always a counter out there. I think 8th edition has been proven to me that even though the counter may not be in the meta, or it may not be something that everyone's playing or even knows about, when you go to a 250 person tournament, someone out there is going to have a list that you're going to have a very hard time with. And it's just the
Yeah,
luck of the draw if you play them or not game 1.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that goes throughout any game. I mean, you might be having going into game 5 of 7 at LVO thinking you're doing great, and all of a sudden you hit your wall, and it's like, man, if it was any of the other 16 to 20 people that are up here playing right now, I think I could have beaten their list, but this is the one list that I was worried about. Why couldn't that Space Marine player play that list and get rid of it?
Yeah.
So
Are you familiar with incursors at all? We had a question come in about incursors. I'm not familiar with them, but I can pull them up while we're talking
I'm
about
not
other things.
sure either.
Okay, so I can pull that information up, and we'll get to the answer to that question in a second. But I'll get Eric talking about something else, and then I'll grab rules on them. So we had primary objectives. We talked a little bit about that, and them not being, and then you needing a movement-based army. Uh, we talked about the chevron. How do you feel about, especially playing Slanesh? Do you just start salivating when you're only 18 inches away instead of 24? A lot of like,
100%. Any of these missions that allow me to get like the two spear ones, whether it be the Dawn of War with a spear tip or the standard uh, 12 inches up where they give you that little extra 3 inches. Oh, it's amazing. It's a guaranteed charge at that point.
so you're, yeah, because you're Slanesh, you're moving 7-8 inches base anyway, even on most of your infantry units.
Demonettes move 7, and then I get D6 plus 1 inch for run, and then I can charge after that for potential 12 plus 1 inch.
That's
So,
nuts.
yeah, when you start running the Soul Forge and Lord Discordance, I mean, that's 14-inch move. I was actually just talking to one of our teammates who wanted to know about a character heavy build, and I sent him a list that had 90, was it 92% of the points into characters, which was, three Lord Discords and a Soul Forge. It had three Keeper Secrets, and those all move 14 inches. So then run and charge on all of them. It had the Keeper Secret special character, Selesky, the or Shalaski, I think is how you pronounce it. The Contorted Epitome, and I think it was either two or three Demon Princes, and the rest was just cultists, just to fill out grabbing objectives. And I mean, you're running 7, 8 dudes that will almost guarantee turn one charge at even with average dice. That's scary with the amount of damage output they have. So yeah, you give me an extra 3 inches, I'm gonna take advantage of it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So it looks like the question came in about incursor squads. He plays Raven Guard, and he plays a lot of incursor squads. And for competitive play, what do you think about them getting up in your face? I just pulled up an incursor squad on Battlescribe. It looks like they have the occult bolt carbines, and that is 24-inch rapid fire 1, strength 4. When resolving an attack made with this weapon, the target does not gain the benefit of cover to its saving throws. They've got paired blades. They're Primaris with 2 attacks, 2 wounds, strength 4, T4. They have the smoke grenades. So instead of shooting, they could subtract 1 from their hit rolls on themselves. And then they may have bonuses like they have a haywire mine. They have the sergeant. You might have the grappling. Is that the guy with the grappling hook? No, it's not. But I don't see anything about them that screams that they're terrible, but I don't necessarily see anything about them that screams that they're
Bad. Yeah,
super
that's
competitive.
what I'm looking at them too. What's nice is they get their 9 inch conceal, so that's gonna subtract from anything being able to pregame move like Alpha Legion does, which that's kind of important for Alpha Legion. And with Raven Guard, it's nice because then you can pull all your stuff back too. Like you put it in, and go, oh no, I really don't want it there. I'm going to spend some CP and pull them up.
Yeah, you go against a unit that has like Nurglings or something, and
Yeah,
you could
killing
force
that.
them back.
Yeah, yeah, you're making it so they're not getting board control. And in all honesty, 90% of these games, it's all about board control.
Yeah.
Putting your opponent into some kind of pincer device or uh, making it say, "Hey, I don't want you in this space. I'm going to force you to go here." Yeah, it's important to do, and that's a lot of what I do with my Slanesh and going, "Hey, I've got a squad of 30 demonettes running up the left flank, and I got 60 more running up the right. Where are you going to go?"
It also, he brought up a point that they have an ability to ignore minuses to hit or modifiers to hit. How useful do you think that is from a competitive setting?
It can be. There's so a lot of the stuff out there right now that are relying on um, the whole -2, -3 to hit stuff doesn't care about bolter fire really anyway. The stuff that's killing them is the multiple damage stuff, uh, your smite spam, things like that are really doing a lot of the damage. But I mean, you're putting in 20 shots at bolters. Even statistically speaking, a third's going to hit, and then half of those are going to wound. You're still only talking, on average, I think it's 8 wounds, and you're going to fail 2 of those, so you lose one guy. Maybe it's important, it might be game changer, but I don't know if it's fully, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but as a troop choice, I don't think that they're bad. I just think that
No,
they're
they're
not.
cheap. They're
Yeah,
they're they're cheap. They're 2 wounds. They've got a decent amount of close combat. I mean, they're 2 attacks each, 3 on the sergeant. Um, there's not anything that's terrible. It's nice that you take a 10-man in combat squad them too.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. How what
more force control.
from kind of bringing it back to the tournament side of things? Do you think combat squatting is super relevant in if you get the extra +1 for going first? Uh,
Uh, a lot. So since the chapter approved came out, a lot of the +1 isn't there anymore. A lot of those new missions that are coming out and are actually being played is you roll off, somebody is placing their entire army and has the roll to go first. Um, there's a lot of tournaments that are going that way, or at least a significant amount of um, the rounds are being played where we're just rolling up. I'm placing all my units, and then you get to counter deploy. Uh, Going back to the old fifth edition style, which I'm okay with. I thought that brought in a great aspect of I know I'm not going first. I don't necessarily want to go first, so I'm going to castle up and I'm going to figure out how I'm going to take your punch and then punch you back. As compared to I'm going to place a unit. I think this is a good play, and all right, you had one less unit. Let's see who goes. And that's where it's hard as far as going back and forth with deployment.
yeah, yeah. So from a tertiary or the secondary objectives, kind of going back to that mission one, it looks like you get 1 victory point for each unit destroyed of your opponents from the second battle round on, and to a maximum of 4 per turn. So, two things that I'm thinking about when I see that. One, I want to keep my stuff survivable, and two, I don't really want to kill a lot of their stuff turn one. Because if they only have, say, 12 units, that means I'm already not max scoring this section, even
Yeah,
if I
so
kill all of them.
there's 2 ways to think of this. What is their differential in points? Do you know? Is it so okay? So here's the big thing: is as far as differential score goes at Adepticon, both players start out with 20 points. Max is 40. So there's a potential 42 points per battle round that each person can get. So theoretically, if you want, you can push up turn one, kill half their army, and you're good as long as you're holding all the primary objectives. So if you get your 24 points in primary, you've already won 40-0.
Oh, so
You
you start with 20
you
already.
start with 20. Yep.
So
And
how do you lose that? Is it based on differential?
so what a lot of their stuff what they're doing is everything is able to be claimed by somebody. So primary is hold objectives. Everybody can hold objectives. So as long as you're holding one, you get a point. If I'm holding more, I get more points, and then it's a differential there. Same thing with killing things, and even the tertiary. It looks like all 3 tertiaries are relatively simple to do. Um, so it really comes down to the primary objective, in my opinion, as far as who's holding the objectives, and that is uh, over over half of the points are in there. Yeah, over half of the points are in the primary objective, as far as because you get 24 for primary, you can get uh, 12 for secondary and 6 for tertiary, and then there's the additional 3 points you can claim for going second.
Okay, so that's a good thing to think about then. Is that if you're going to like to maximize your play style, you could do that without having to do secondary
Yeah, you
roles.
can play that game. Yeah, or or if you're planning on playing the killy type and ignoring the objectives, you just got to be able to hold objectives, and then you can win that way too.
Yep. Because even as mission one, holding two objectives makes it very hard for your opponent. He has to get all three of the other ones
Yeah,
in
he
order to
has to.
pull points away from you.
Exactly. Yeah, otherwise, yeah. So most likely, a lot of the stuff primary is going to be tied. Um, Theoretically, with the way people are going to have to play the game, because it's forcing you to go after the center objectives. It's forcing you to put some of your models out there to die. Some armies are going to be better at surviving it. Horde armies, orcs are going to be huge at saying, "I'm on an objective, take me off of it with my leadership 30." Uh, Chaos can stay on there. Um, you've got your Eldar shenanigans and all that too with Jinx and Fortune.
Yeah.
So or protecting Fortune. So
And then tertiary objectives, just so we can get on to mission two. Uh, Solo blood, destroy an enemy unit in a battle round in which your opponent does not.
yep.
And then, do you think that's? I think it's better than first blood. Personally, I think first blood was swingy. It gave more power to the person who went first.
What I
Uh,
like about Solo Blood is it allows assault armies to still be able to get it. So First Blood or First Strike or whatever it was, where so First Blood it was one person got it. First Strike was if you killed something on your turn one, which if you went first as an assault army half the time, it was tough. Uh, but if you're saying that any turn I can claim it, yeah, that's doable for everybody to get.
because a good assault army, you'll be killing a lot of them later in the game, and they won't be killing much of you back. So,
Correct. Yeah, they're gonna kill you at the beginning, and you're gonna kill them at the end.
and then slay the warlord is pretty straightforward. Hasn't really changed much.
That's generic.
And then a modified line breaker. So at the end of the game, have at least one of your units entirely within your opponent's deployment zone. They took away the part of where your opponent also doesn't have to be there. Like now it's simplified to just have a unit in your opponent's deployment zone.
Yeah, and I think that Linebreaker, I don't know if you have to have it fully in as well with Linebreaker. It just had to be partially with it, if I remember
Uh,
correctly.
got it. So that may be a change too. I like
Yeah,
it. It's pretty straightforward.
those are easy. Those are all. I don't have any questions on them. So they make sense. They sound right, and they flow right with what they're trying to achieve as an objective in their game.
Now, mission one, if I'm just going to evaluate mission one as if I was only going to play mission one, it screams to me bring knights. Because it's going to be hard for your opponent to get, solo blood. You could hide your warlord as one of the knights. Linebreakers, not that hard with Gallants. Measured extermination, you basically, if you're only playing 4 or 5 knights, you're going to basically take the secondary objectives off the table for your opponent.
Knights would be a good army. In all honesty, probably for most of these, because I think the primary and the tertiary stay the same throughout all four of these missions. Yeah, they're all the same throughout the four. The only thing that changes is the secondary. Um, so that's big. Um, but it's also one of those things where knights are going to have issues because all it takes is one troop model to survive. You Lord of Dancing on them to grab the objective from you.
Yeah, yep. They do have their weaknesses, like a lot of armies do, but
Yeah,
it being able to just turn off 12 points of scoring, I think is pretty big, especially at least this first mission.
yeah. It's just for I think knights are killable. I think that doing as far as you can kill a knight and not lose something in the process. especially when you start whittling down nights to only having one night or
Yeah.
2 nights. It's not hard to maintain that.
And then
So
yeah, knights definitely, unless you take that one household, the Raven or Riven, they have the
all
weakness of
the
yeah,
hawk shroud.
yeah, you get hurt them and they become significantly less effective, you know,
Yep.
or of 18% less effective at half, and then if you want to get into the numbers game. But we're going to strategic advance. This is mission 2. So we've gotten out of mission 1. We're of mission 1 evaluating. I personally think knights for mission 1, but that's just it by itself. Going into mission 2, deployment is everyone's favorite corners that no one knows how to deploy effectively. But they did in this one, which is not one I've seen a lot of people do before. I've seen people just show the corners. They actually give you the dimensions, the 48 by 24 up.
Okay, interesting. Which does not correspond with the numbers that they give you for the actual breakdown.
Uh, yeah. So if this is actually 24 up, the picture's misleading. 24 up is halfway up the board, and the colored triangle is not halfway. It's more than halfway.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely like 30 ish, or yeah, 60% up.
so that is what it is. I would definitely, if I was playing this, practice with the numbers that are given, because 48 by 24 is 2/3 and then only a half. A
Yeah,
question.
that's actually a really weird setup. You're going to be pushing on that one. You're going to be pushing more than 24 inches away.
Yes, it is more
You're
than
going to be
24 inches away.
you're going to be. It's almost closer to 30.
Yeah. So that's definitely a gun line.
Yeah, that one's scary for any kind of assault army to go against.
Yeah. And a question just came in. Do we think ninth edition would be in before tournaments come back up?
No.
Yeah, tournaments are already starting to come back, depending on what state you're in and
Yeah.
what's going on.
Missouri.
So
Yeah, Missouri's holding a GT in the middle of June. They're limiting it to 50 players so they can still uphold their social distancing. And I think it might be 2,000 points, but I think theirs is one of the ones that is down to 1850, if I remember correctly.
yeah, so I think the earliest speculation anyone's even thought of an 8.5 or a ninth edition is July or August, to be told that it was even coming, let alone there's going to be a couple months there after we're hinted at it between stuff actually coming out.
Yeah, we've already hit the stall point. I mean, we haven't seen anything since the Space Wolf Codex, and I mean, we've already heard of 2 or 3 other codexes coming out. The new there've been 2 new books, the Adeptus Mechanicus and Knights release that they've hinted at a couple times, and then obviously the Necron stuff that's coming out now. But those have both been hinted at, and we haven't seen any of that. So everything is going to be pushed back, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't see ninth happening until next year.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm with you on that one. So mission 2, tertiary objectives, the same, but you should still check them. I've seen a lot of times where even the first, the second, and the fourth mission will have the same tertiary objectives, but the third one won't. And
It'll fool you.
if you're like trying to think that they're all the same, they won't be. So definitely worth looking at. The deployments Vanguard. Primary objectives are 6 objectives now, so it'll be 3 and 3. It's an even number of objectives, which is different than the first mission, because the trick to that is, in order to hold more than your opponent, you're going to need to hold 4 now instead of 3. You're going to need an army that'll spread out better.
Or hold 3 and shoot them off of their third.
Yes, or hold 3 and shoot them off of their third, which actually hurts my Knights theory, because holding 3 objectives for Knights is more difficult for that particular army than it is for other armies that have more units. Mm-hmm. Still straight 5 battle rounds, which I like. I like that better than variable battle rounds, especially. But even the 6 and 7, I mean, it seems like we'll know what a winner is by 5 battle rounds.
Yeah.
It's also better on time because you don't have to schedule time for a round around the idea that someone may have a 6 and 7. Um, Primary objectives take and hold, which is holding one objectives one, two or more is two, more than your opponent is three. So in a rare occasion, you might hold one and still hold more than your opponent, but in this game, you're gonna want to think about holding 3 or 4 objectives all the time.
Yeah. You need at least two.
Yeah. Uh,
At least two.
At least two, which is difficult in this deployment map because it's one is in your deployment zone, and then the rest are outside of your deployment zone.
Yeah. One of them is just outside. Um, because it's right on the center line of the board, 15 inches up, and the other one are 12 inches off of each corner. So the one in the center is a pretty easy move to grab. The ones in the corners, you're putting yourself to you're exposing something
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that point. Like I was saying before, there's normally not terrain that's over in the corner. You're probably gonna throw something over there, something cheap, something easy. Maybe your nurglings or whatever, and say, I hope it survives.
yeah, yeah. And if it doesn't, you're gonna have to dedicate resources to getting it back.
Yeah, and you got to put something back over there or take them off their objectives. So
Yeah,
it's a yeah. I like missions where it's more even and not just a centralized objective as well.
yeah.
I think that requires a lot more mental thought on how you're gonna hold your objectives as well as taking objectives.
So when we're talking about objectives, how does that change your idea of a list when you play in a tournament where you can place them? Because that's a whole mind game in and of itself to begin with.
So you know that yeah, that's a challenging one because I think that depends on your play style. Um, I typically, if uh, me playing all assault, it's very rare that I put objectives on in my deployment zone. I might put one, maybe two, but most of the objectives I want on their side of the board. Uh, I've also played where I don't like things being in terrain. So a lot of my objectives with playing an assault army is I'm putting things out in the open. That way they can't camp on it, and me when I'm charging them, not -2 charge for like going through craters and things like that. Because that's the last thing you want is to boink yourself on a charge because you misplaced an objective.
Yeah, you could even, when you said you were placing them outside of your deployment zone with an assault focused army, if the mission packet says objectives can't be placed within 12 inches of each other, don't feel bad. I've gotten weird looks when I play assault armies placing an objective in your opponent's deployment zone to deny
Yeah.
him area. If there's a building that's only 12 inches by 12 inches or even smaller because the
Put it
diagonal
on.
is weird,
Yep.
put it
Put it
on a
on the
corner,
outside.
put it on the
Yep.
outside, deny him the ability of putting an objective in his own buildings, or like put it 12 inches up from the corner so that he can't put it directly in the corner because sometimes it's 6 inches from an outside edge. So you could deny your opponent from being able to place things far in their backfield, you know?
Yep, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, and then it turns into a game of snaking units out to grab objectives and maintaining uh, corners. Because if you, a lot of times people place an objective in the corner and then use that as an anti deep strike corner. So basically, it's like you can't deep strike back there because you don't have the space to put it in because you can't come within 9 inches. So if you place something out 15 inches, they can't put it in the corner. If they want the objective, they got to be on it, and then they got to string back to the corner to still prevent you. And it plays a different style game.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when they're, if you do have a little bit of shooting in that list, you could shoot that unit and where they're going to pull their casualties from. Are they going to
Yep.
pull it to allow you to deep strike, or are they going to pull it to pull themselves off that objective? Weird mind game there.
Yeah, I don't think it's as big as it was a couple editions ago, where if you failed your leadership, you'd run because that was huge too. But yeah, in this current style, yeah, I definitely think placing things more central is the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. So the thing that's different with this mission 2 that wasn't there in mission 1, secondary objective of key point. Before deployment, each player secretly chooses an objective not in their deployment zone as their key point. At the end of the game, players earn an additional 4 victory points if they control their key point, or 8 victory points if they control the key point, but their opponent does not. If they control their key point, but their opponent does not. 12 if they control both key points. This is a little wordy, and how would you go about like keeping your opponent to like being honest about what his key point is?
Normally, what I'll do is I'll write it down on the back of a mission, or um, as far as so I've got my mission, I've got my army list in front of me. I'll flip it over, write at which objective number I'm on, and then we'll just keep it down. So at the end of the game, we're like, hey, this was mine, and we'll both flip over a piece of paper. Um, I have yet to have an issue where people have like snuck under the table to rewrite their numbers so they have the right objective or anything like that. It's a lot of trust, but I think most people are getting that's something that you're not going to have too many issues over.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree that, and even if someone's gonna do that to you, like at that point, it's a game. Like
Yeah,
if you're really,
congratulations, you just cheated at Plastic Army Man. Like, what do you want? A cookie as well?
yeah. And Yogi did a comment about he hopes his Marines that he's painting up don't get dissed too hard in the new edition. I don't think personally you will ever have to worry about Space Marines not being good in Warhammer 40k ever.
No, that's their baby.
Yeah, the GW loves Space Marines. That's their big seller. I would say more than 50% of their competitive and non-competitive player base plays some form of Space Marines or Imperium unit or Imperial soup with Space Marines.
Yep.
They're not going to piss off over 50% of their player base.
Yeah, I mean, you
Now,
might stall here and there. Like they did that at the beginning of Eighth Edition, where Marines were just kind of at a bland point. When I look at them now, I mean, they're at 80% of the tournaments as far as the army, compositions per the tournament, and they're winning a lot of them or placing in the top 10, 6 to 8 of the list. It's kind of insane
yeah,
that there's
yeah,
not that much of a spread.
yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, no problem, Yogi.
But that's also why GW comes out with neuters so quick on some of these lists
Yeah,
because it's just so insane.
it'd be different if you played Necrons, because Necrons will be real good for about a month after their new pariahs. I think new pariahs come out, and then they'll be like completely shut down in the beginning of Ninth Edition.
I'm curious what they're going to do with the pariahs. I'd like to see some stats on them. Because I mean that was one of my main armies in fourth edition. I played a destroyer spam list with 15 destroyers, 4 heavy destroyers, 2 destroyer lords, and a monolith.
Yeah,
And it won a lot. It was a lot of fun to play. And then that was back when Necrons phased out. If you lost 75% of your army, you just went away. You just lost.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I've got a Necron tattoo on my back, and that was one of my first. I would say that was my first competitive army was Necrons.
Yeah, it was my well, I wasn't competitive when I was 8, but it was my first army.
Yeah, yeah.
uh yeah,
Yeah, the Necrons came out with the RTT era was happening where you could legitimately go to a local Rogue Trader tournament every week, and it was insane. I mean, I remember going with one of our other guys, Ian. Um, we would hit up two tournaments minimum a week. You'd hit one on Saturday, one on Sunday. It was just silly.
yeah, it'd be huge. I'd love to see pariahs get some sort of like AoE psychic denial.
They had that before where they could each deny one. They had a gauze gun in their war scythe sword that was 24-inch range assault 2, strength 5. There'll probably be something similar. They were toughness 5 and strength 5, which was nice. Um, the, I'm assuming there'll probably be 2 wound models this time, just because the lore behind them.
Yeah,
And what you're seeing as far as like even the one that that video that came out so yesterday or 2 days ago, where it showed the hieroglyphs and all that, and it had the two or the big bulky dudes. Those were the pariah. So I'm assuming they're going to be bigger and bulkier.
Like Primera
Uh,
size, you think they're going to be a
yeah,
bigger
yeah,
model?
yeah, yeah. Which they were bigger to begin with inside the or when they first came out in that Necron fourth edition or whatever. It was towards the end of fourth they came out.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, they were intimidating. I mean, they weren't necessarily great to play with because they didn't have "We'll Be Back." Um, so I'm kind of curious if they'll get that, but I'm curious what they're doing with that and the Silent King. He's gonna be, I think he's gonna be kind of neat, and
Yeah.
how his fluff is gonna turn into it because he was pre pre Satan
Yeah,
and
and
all
he
that.
he
So
didn't want anything to do with the Catan too. So
no, yeah, that's why he went. That's why he went into sleeping and all that. So I'm really curious to see what they do with him and how they're gonna reanimate him back into the game.
yeah, yeah. Um, but that's the secondary objectives were the unique ones on this mission. Is basically hold. The only way to guarantee this is hold every objective, essentially,
Yeah,
because yeah, and they're pretty far apart from each other. They're more than the center objectives are more than 24 inches apart, or a little less than 24 inches apart. Sorry, the two tertiary ones are 24 inches apart, and you're looking at about 24 inches side to side on them as well. So it's not like you're going to string out a 10-man guardsman squad to get those.
no, I see orcs doing really well at this flood
Yeah,
as far as spreading out their grots and still maintaining their leadership 30 and just being obnoxious while their shock attack guns and all that are in the far back,
I
just blasting away at everything.
I agree, and that's a very distinct change from my opinion on Knight's mission one. A horde army, like you said, Oryx couldn't agree more. Oryx mission two, uh, pulling in mission three called Burn It Down. Uh, Deployment, a modified Dawn of War. So we're looking like 12 inches up. No, even more than 12 inches up. You're looking at uh, 18 inches up. You're at 18-inch no man's land in the center. So you're 16 up,
15.
15 up. It was like, thank you.
15 up.
15 on both sides, 18 in the center. Uh, Corner objectives, 9 from the corners, and then
Nine,
9
directly in the center.
Yeah, one. Well, that's the center point.
Oh no, that's the center point.
But the
Yeah, okay.
objectives are 24 apart or 12 from the center point.
Yep.
Uh, Looking like primary objectives, same as all the other missions. Tertiary objectives, same as all the other missions. So the secondaries are what's really going to be different, what you have to build around. And the secondary being Scorched Earth. For the second battle round on, once per turn, rather than counting a held objective towards taken hold, the controller player can elect to destroy it. You cannot elect to destroy objectives in your deployment zone, so you can't destroy the 2 of the 6, right? There's 6 total, 2 are in your deployment zone. Yep. And then destroyed objectives are removed from play, and at the end of the game earn 2 VP for each destroyed objective in no man's land, 4 VP for each destroyed objective in your opponent's deployment zone, to a maximum of 12. 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you have to destroy all 4 of them to get the max points. Your opponent destroys any of them, they're denying you points. I think when I'm looking at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, what that's saying is hold the middle, destroy the middle as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to get over to your opponent's side and destroy theirs first.
Yeah, if that's possible, I agree. If it's possible to hard flank.
Yeah, this is going to be something for a quick army. Man, how would you do this?
Yeah, so like Raven Guard, Yogi's Raven Guard, being able to get those war suits 9 inches away from your opponent's line.
Oh yes, the good old Invictus.
The Invictus, you just run 3 Invictuses down the sideline, and then crash in and destroy.
Mm-hmm.
I think your list, your demonette list,
Yeah, the demons would work fine with it. The flawless host.
yeah. Um, things that'll struggle. I think gun lines will struggle against this one. I don't think they'll be able to get to your opponent's objectives very easily, and even if they, even if you do, a lot of gun lines can't move and still be effective. So, uh, it's gonna be rough for a gunline army.
Yeah, I see a lot of this style play here of turning. You're gonna circle around each other's army, so you're gonna each take. You're either gonna go clockwise or counterclockwise around each other to get to the objectives.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of guard are gonna have to take their sweet time going around, and yeah, it's gonna be an interesting game altogether because then you're also got to tie in your primary of holding more, holding two, so you can't destroy all four, not in one, not right away at least, because then you can't hold two unless you're holding the last two objectives on the table,
So,
and then
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just saw something. Does um Adepticon do the whole flyers or things with the flyer battle roll cannot hold objectives?
yeah, yeah, that's in the rule book.
Okay. So I think under the same wording, I would argue that flyers can't destroy objectives because it says instead of holding it, you
I
could
would
choose to destroy that objective.
100%.
So if I mean that's something your opponent may try and pull over on you is just fly a bunch of flyers into your zone and then say, "Oh, he's not holding it, he's destroying it." But
Yeah,
I think my argument here would be he has to have held it in order to destroy it.
I agree.
So, uh,
Yeah, and I think that's the way it would get worded or ruled down there as well.
yeah. And I actually don't see. I mean, flyer heavy armies do good at killing things and surviving, but
They're non-existent anymore. You
yeah,
can't play it.
I I think that Adepticon, at least all these missions that we've looked at, have so much points on holding objectives or denying the holding objectives of your opponent that a flyer heavy army would do very poorly at this
Yeah,
event.
and you just don't see them anymore since the FAQ came out where you can charge over the flyer bases and you can't. So like the 9 Eldar flyers couldn't sit there and zigzag each other and then block all the farseers and stuff behind. You can't do that anymore. So that's why that list is just gone.
Yeah. You know what list? I was doing a video, and anyone watching that'd be interested, you could check this video out in our YouTube and in the VODs of like weird fringe potential lists. There's a 13 drop pod list that
I watched you put that up. Yeah.
null deploys turn one, and then deploys 13 drop pods with their doors open, so that you checkerboard off the whole board, and you make people have to take out nodes of the thing just to even get in. Do you think that it would? I mean, not against your demonettes, because your demonettes could chew up multiple drop pods in a turn, but I think there's some lists that would have a very hard time against that kind of board control.
I think some would, but I think at the same time, if they can take you off turn one, you're done. And there's enough armies out there right now with enough indirect fire that can, even with null deploy and all that, you're not gonna survive their shooting,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is huge.
that's huge. That is huge.
And you got to remember, you've got to go first in order for this to work. You know, you go
Yeah,
second against my demon list, you're not putting anything on the table. You're done. You've now played your game with all your models on the on your display. They're not coming in.
yeah, Frosty. We were talking about the 13 drop pods potentially doing good in this,
Yeah,
but
and the same thing with anything Alpha Legion right now. Alpha Legion would just throw everything up the board. They'd spend all their CPs to say, all right, everybody's moving 9 inches. We're gonna warp time this guy to the far corner. These guys are gonna spread out over here, and they'll just null deploy you, which it would be a painful game.
it would be very rough. Uh,
I mean, as your opponent, I would probably be laughing at you the entire time because it would be that comical to do. But and I would hope you would get the gist out of it too. But man, that was kind of funny that I totally screwed this list up. But yeah, I think that style list, you got to go first, otherwise you're in trouble.
Yeah, you got to go first, and you got to like you got to play real well. It's a real fringe.
You're tying almost half your points up into drop pods, which aren't killing anything with their one storm bolter.
No, 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 not at all.
So that's the big thing you really got to think of is what are you really accomplishing?
You're just hoping that
They
they
survive on the
survive
objectives.
on the
Yeah.
objectives. Yeah, because really you're trying to get to 20 points. 20 points is your sweet spot, right? Because that'll get you from 20 to 40 or 42. You need 22 points.
You would need, well, you only need 20 to get to swap. Yeah, to get you to 40 because 40 is the max points.
Oh,
There's
42.
no, there's 42 potential points, but the swing is only 20. So you start with 20 and it's a swing of 20. So the max points you can get per game is only 40. You might get
Oh,
42 points, but you're cut off at 40 points.
gotcha. Okay, and that's an Adepticon straight thing.
That's at Adepticon, yes.
Hey, Frosty, how's it going, man? Uh,
And
so
that's the same way with Michigan GT2 is there's normally more points than you can get. But that makes it so you have to go after multiple objectives.
yeah, so this would be, I mean, this would be real dumb though. Like if you did go first, basically, because those center objectives are 9 inches off of their deployment zone anyway. I think, like even in game one, we were looking at the most of the objectives being outside of the deployment zone.
Yes.
That drop pod list would it would just be it would be very easy to counter and it'd be a very high risk versus reward, but it would be
Yeah,
funny.
I think you could play it right though, or play against it right. I'm gonna say is it all it takes again is one space marine, one cultist to say I'm charging your drop pod, and now it's my objective.
Yeah.
Can't it has no close combat attacks, so it just sits there, and I'm gonna sit in combat with it, and you can't shoot me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It can't fall back. It can't do
It can't
anything.
run. Yeah, and the base isn't big enough to make it so I can't be within 3 inches of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can go in right at the edge of the hinges of the doors and be within 3 inches of the objective.
Yeah. Do you ever play the game There Are Billions or We Are Billions? It's a zombie survival game where they send like millions of
Okay,
zombies up against the wall. But it seems like that would be like your demonettes against that drop pod. You just slam into it and then chew away
you
the.
hit it. Yeah, I would have to make a path. It's like kill two or three, and then we're just gonna ignore the other ones that are on the objectives because I'll just touch them and keep moving.
Yeah, you're right, Frosty. Statistically, two of the drop pods would explode. So you would get some drop pod explosion goodness.
Oh no, see, so that again, that also depends with that too. Like you're talking about interlocking them with the doors. You play against Alpha Legion, you're in trouble because they make you explode on a 3+.
Yeah. But that's a big explosion because you're counting
I
anything within 3 inches of even any of the doors.
Yeah, I would take it though because I mean you're gonna lose. On average, you're gonna have another 3 drop pods touching, so you'll lose 6 wounds between that, and I'm only gonna lose 2 wounds. You might kill a possessed while I'm chipping away at a ton of wounds.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
So yeah, or I don't have to be in combat with you, and I'll shoot you with a blitz and make you blow up. Pick that one in the middle that's got touching 6 of them, and watch that guy blow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. You have 3 pods in that list that are that strength 8 missile, 2-shot missile launcher.
Yeah,
That would be the
that's
first
right.
one.
Yeah,
First ones to go.
yes, for sure.
I, which is interesting that you could take a Death Strike missile launcher and that allows you to take another drop pod to
Uh
go
huh.
with their drop pod. uh,
Yeah, yeah, because it's not counting as a transport itself.
so moving on, we're getting up to I don't know, about an hour and a half in, but we're in our last mission, and we'll do some wrap up stuff after this last mission. But it looks like it's not quite table quarters. It's 18 by 30.
Yeah, this is
So
another unique one.
uh that what is 18 by 30? That's gonna put you like
It takes you
18 inches away.
yeah, it takes you 6 inches off of each corner. Um, as far as what your normal deployment for that one corner deployment that you would normally get, which is 24 by 36, and then there's the 9-inch center no man's. I think this one is 24-inch no man's is what this will equal out to be.
So if it's a 24-inch no man's, that's best case scenario though. That's point to point, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be an assault army being hard to get to you.
So that's 2 out of the 4 lists, and 2 out of the 4 games, and the last game being, which is the most important out of the 4, arguably, not great assault missions because you're over 24-inch no man's land.
Yeah.
Does that come into play for how you would build an army to play this?
In a way, I'd probably have more rhinos, but I think I'm leaning towards more rhinos anyway with the Grey Knights coming out or with the Grey Knights out. I think a lot of this, if I'm still playing my Slanesh, I can still cross that gap pretty consistently and be okay. And the other thing is this allows me to still get board control, which is huge too. Yes, I might go first and then take a ton of shooting, but I've now put you in that corner. I have all 5 objectives, and you got to come to me to get them off, which is ideal situation for me is you coming to me. So
Yeah.
it is still beneficial for an assault army. You just have to play it as I've got to take a punch before as I'm going to the objectives, and even if I'm going first.
Yeah. And
instead of going, all right, here I come.
so looking at all the deployments and all the midfield objectives, what do you think of stuff like aggressors? Midfield, shorter range, holding beat stick stuff to basically kind of push into the center of the board and then try and kill anything that comes around it.
So I think with the hurt that Raven Guard got with the Centurions, I think aggressors are going to be the new meta when actual tabletop comes back. Because there was nothing that was said that aggressors couldn't do what the Centurions were doing. That's huge. Aggressors are just as good as Centurions, in my opinion. They might not have as many options as far as weaponry, but they still pack a punch, and they're still gross in shooting and close combat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we just had a kind of an influx of viewers, so just take it back for a second. We are Team Bad Decisions. If you're just joining us, we'd love to have you and see you and talk to you in chat. We're doing a review of what was supposed to be Adepticon's missions this year. We're on mission 4, and we're talking about kind of looking at a mission, the missions that come out ahead of time before you go to the tournament, before you have list submissions for the tournament, and how you could look at particular spots of these missions and help maximize your list potential when you're building a list. So, Laughing Jester, if you're not using aggressors or centurions, I'd be interested to see what you're spending those points on. I know that you're, or at least you said you're a Crimson Fist kind of guy. That's still a lot of bolter fire, so that's something. That's something shooting a lot of bolters. But getting into the secondary objectives of this mission, because the secondary objectives are different on each set. Primary are the same. Primary are always hold 1's worth 1, hold 2 objectives are worth 2 or more, and then holding more than your opponent is the coveted half of that score the whole time. So that's going to be the key. You want to think about that in every mission, is how am I going to hold more than my opponent? So two kind of components to that. One is you have to hold a lot of objectives. The other one is you have to kill them off their objectives. and you could supplement one with the other if you leaned more in one direction or another, but you still need both of those, uh, both of those things. Um, the secondary objectives here called take claim or stake claim. From the second battle round on, rather than counting a take and hold objective, is this? Yeah, this is that mission. So it's just written very similar to the other one. Instead of counting the take and hold objective towards take and hold, the controlling player may elect to lay claim to it. After being claimed, the objective remains in play for the take and hold and remains claimed unless an opponent lays claim to it in a subsequent turn. Ooh, that's a mouthful. At the end of the game, earn 4 VPs for each objective that you still have claimed. So there's actually like no benefit to staking claims to anything before the last turn of the game. Because it doesn't say like the burning an objective said you could only burn 1 per turn. This just says instead of holding it, you could lay claim to it. And you could hold multiple objectives a turn. So I actually would just ignore this and focus on killing my opponent, and then in the end spread out, claim all the objectives.
The benefit with this, from my interpretation of it, is you claim it, you lay claim to this objective, your opponent can't gain take and hold for it. However, every turn after that, you can claim take and hold from it.
So you're right, but
that's the big one, because then that's going to deny them the ability to hold the objectives, because that's what they're not doing, because they have to retake the objectives from you. Yeah, you can take more than 1 or 2 or 3 a turn, which is fine. You do that turn 1. Turn 2, they want to come back and take them. They're not claiming take and hold. But then you can theoretically still hold. If they don't take them all, next turn you can claim the take and hold from them.
And you
and still have them claimed.
You hold the objectives at the beginning of your turn.
Yes.
So you effectively, if they killed you off of it and then they took it, then if they killed you off of it with assault and then they took it, they would get it that turn on their first turn. Because they'd kill you on your turn, they'd be on it and holding it on their turn, and then you would just claim it. Because you claim it when you would hold it. But if they shot you off of it and they moved to it, they wouldn't get it. Because they wouldn't claim it until their next turn.
So, I guess with my interpretation, if you already have it, say I went up, I grabbed it, even if you come up and assault me on it, it's still my objective. Like, even if you take me off of it, so next turn, in order for you to claim it, you have to claim it, if that makes any sense. So you have to untake it or unclaim it from me to claim it for yourself.
And
otherwise, it's still my objective.
I agree 100%, but you could claim it and score it in the same turn. So there's no reason if you have it to not claim it.
You could no, because if you're claiming, or if you're staking claim,
yeah,
you can't use take and hold.
You're right. That when they're staking claim, they don't get take and hold.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. You could play that kind of counter game with them. So if they kill you off your turn or whatever, you can still go back up and touch it again, and they have to do the whole process again. So it does take away as far as one of the 3 objectives that you're doing, either hold 1, hold 2, or hold more. So that could come into play. I would have to play this a little bit to figure out when it's wise to stake claim and when it's wise to just take the points from the primary.
Yep. And that's a good point too. You brought up, don't let Adepticon, if you're planning on playing Adepticon and these missions get published 3 months ahead of time, don't let Adepticon be the first time you're playing these missions.
Yeah, you need to play these things.
The stuff you'll notice, especially with a lot of the local area tournaments, will adapt Adepticon missions after they get published and have primers and test missions and test tournaments, and take advantage of going to that. Even if you take advantage of going to that with a fun, fluffy list, just to learn what the mission is like, and then
Yeah.
bring your beat face list to Adepticon singles.
Yeah, there's several times where I'll talk to local store owners and all that myself and say, hey, Adepticon's rules just came out, or Michigan GT's missions just came out. Can you run an event like that? And you're going to get people in uh, even more than your normal because more people are going to go to the Michigan GT, or you're going to have a wider verse or variety of people, and not just your local gamers show up to these tournaments. So you're going to get more exposure for the store as well as yourself to learn the way other people are planning on playing at this large event that's coming up.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Adepticon, something that we've kind of touched on in talking with other things and other events that are moving towards game clocks. There were supposed to be game clocks, at least at the top tables, right,
Yeah,
with
I think it was
Adepticon?
I think it was a top 16 tables or something like that, top 24.
Now,
They're having
what do you
clocks on
think?
them.
What do you think about clocks?
Um, I like clocks to a certain extent. I have used clocks before, and at the Michigan GT, I think we only used a clock 1 out of the 5 games, and one of them I was even towards one of the higher tables. I think I just ended uh, past the mandated you have to play with a clock, and we didn't have any issues going through turn 5. Turn I think with the last guy Chris, um, he I think we made it to turn 6, and we talked out turn 7 because we legitimately were exhausted. Um, the I don't think clocks have ever been a factor in my games, even with moving 200 models. You just learn to adapt to move faster, and if you want to chat, you talk during them while they're moving their models, and that way you can focus on your stuff too. Um, but I have seen it to the point of where you and your opponent are playing, you guys are tight on time, you say you got 15, 20 minutes more than they do, their clock runs out, and I'll be darned if those dudes don't turn into the biggest rules lawyers you've ever seen and question you on everything, so they're burning your clock time. I've seen that multiple times, and it actually came up at one of the big tournaments last year. That it was live streamed, and there's another guy who does podcasts that talks about it. I can't think of his name, but he was the victim of it, and it was bad. So you think you know that things aren't gonna, or that clocks are gonna fix a lot of things, but there's only so much clocks can do, and that they might fix slow play, but they don't fix all the problems.
No, I agree. What do you think you could do um, if that is happening to you? Because
Get a get a judge immediately and have them watch your game. Don't let them walk away from your game.
got it. Oh yeah, and if you're at one of the top tables, I think that should be a an okay thing.
Yes, most of the top tables are going to have dedicated judges on them. Um, the as that way they're just being monitored a lot more closely. Some of these larger events, because of some of the issues that have happened over the last year or two, they're specifically dedicating one, if not two, judges per table in certain situations. I know LVO had a judge per table, I think on the top 16. And then they had a head judge as well that was wandering in case there were still arguments while the judge was having. Uh, if the judge couldn't come up with a clear answer, they would call the head judge in.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense. A question came in from Frosty. Where does the pre first turn time go? Do you start your clock when you play with the clock at like objective placement? Do you start it at terrain? Do you start it in the beginning? Like when, as a gamer, do you think it's healthy to like? Okay, now the clock's gonna start. Is it turn one? Is it pre turn one?
That depends on the event. Some of the events like Adepticon have I believe, a free 15 minutes to begin with before clocks are supposed to be started, which allows you to go over your army list, the mission, placing terrain, placing objectives, and getting it going. The Michigan GT had it incorporated in. I know we had a couple of complaints that we didn't allow time to, uh, didn't allow a little bit of extra time for deployment. And several of the judges and the head TOs and all that, and including some outsider help as far as people that went to the local practice tournament for the Michigan GT. We sat down and go, okay, how long is it going to take you to do your setup? And it was legitimately less than 2 minutes for you to place 8 pieces of terrain and place objectives. That everything else on top of that, you can start looking at people's army list as you're deploying, as they're deploying. There's times and places like that, and a lot of these bigger tournaments now are going to places like Best Coast Pairing and all that. So right after your round is done, and you're going and having your half-hour break in between while they're finishing putting in scores, you know who your opponent is, and you can see their army list, and you can go in and look at their army list on there, and that's the time you're supposed to spend looking at their list, figuring out how you want to play their list, and figuring out how you're going to set up the terrain if there is terrain to be set up. That's that type of stuff on there. But yeah, it's as far as what normally we'll do for the games that I have played the tournament or for the clocks and all that. It's, hey, it took us 3 minutes to get going. We each take a minute and a half off of our time, and turn one, go, and you tap your clock.
Yeah. Um.
So
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off at
yeah,
the end.
no, and most of the tournaments like that too. I know the Michigan GT did it a little bit. There was like a 5 minute grace period, where say it took somebody a little bit longer to set up terrain and all that. They allowed them to still finish their game even after the 3 hours time was called, because they only had 4 or 5 minutes left of gameplay on their clock. So if you didn't have a half hour to an hour left over on your clock, they'll still let you normally play it out a little bit because you're still abiding by their 3 hour timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Yogi mentioned, or Jester, sorry, I want to get the right credit to the right person. Jester mentioned wearing good shoes at Adepticon because you're standing all the time.
100%. And you're on concrete there.
And
There's no carpet. You're on concrete floor.
I would say also, if you take it one step further, you can buy those like foam kids play mats that are like
All mats.
the little foam mats, or even like really good like bathroom shower mats, those thick water absorbent mats. You don't know how much of a difference it would make standing on one of those for 8-10 hours compared to standing on concrete in any kinds of shoes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Memory foam, padding, anything like that, it does wonders for your feet and your back. Your back is just destroyed after Adepticon.
Yeah, and if you bring one for you and one for your opponents, that's an instant like high sportsmanship score.
Yeah,
I
you get some bonus points there for sure.
I would play a complete dick and still give him high points in sportsmanship if he gave me a pad to stand on and I didn't have one. It legit, and it starts you off on a great foot because you're even starting off like, I'm gonna play this game mean, but I care about you as a person. Like here's a mat,
Exactly.
here's a mat that you get to stand on, so you're not physically hurt while I emotionally hurt you on this table.
Yeah.
Not saying you should.
100%.
Not saying you shouldn't play like a dick. But if you did, I would give you more leeway with being a
Yeah.
good person.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure.
The other comments that are being brought up is water. Bring water. Yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
How about you? We do have like I don't know, 20 minutes to kill or so before the end of the show. Other than your army and your list, what else do you think you'd bring to a big tournament like Adepticon?
I bring multiple tape measures. I normally will bring 4 to 6 easily. Um, a lot of times I bring one tape measure per round because there's going to be a chance that you're going to leave it. It might get picked up. You might break it. Um, so if you're having a substantial amount, the same thing with your army list, having multiple copies. I normally bring double the amount that they request, just in case my opponent loses it. Uh, Water gets spilt on it. You can't read it anymore. Um, yeah, the basically whatever you think, double up on pens. I normally buy a box of pens uh,
Yeah.
and bring in. I think the last year I brought 2 boxes of 30, and by the time it was done, I think I walked home with maybe 2 pens, maybe maybe four. But that's because I'm not only am I using it, I'm giving them to my opponents to use, and there's tables next to us. They're like, "Hey man, you got a pen?" Because they lose theirs too.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
they, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're good. No, you're good.
They mentioned coming in from Frosty good energy snacks. Not like it's not additive. You can't drink 3 5 hour energies and have 15 hours of nonstop energy. You need some actual protein.
You need
Some
protein bars, nuts. I normally bring like trail mix and stuff like that to snack on. Anything that get a little bit of caffeine with chocolate, as well as your high protein with nuts.
and you
That's
gotta
just
love your nuts, man.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Take yeah, nom nom nom.
Right.
Okay, so food and drink. A lot of like Adepticon especially has food there, but it's usually everyone goes on break at the same time, and it's brought in at a food court where you're waiting in line. Was last year the first time that they had like the additional food court in the hallway on top of
No,
the food court?
they've had that for 2 or 3 years now. Um, Both of them though. You got to remember that the 40K side isn't the only people that are there. You've got Age of Sigmar, you've got your Star Wars, you've got your people there to play board games and Malifaux and whatever else you can think of. It's all there. Your vendors are all there. The employees are there. You know that everybody needs to eat. Um, I think the main thing to remember is you're not going to be paying $2 for a burger. You're going to be paying 10. So it does get pricey. There's no refills on your pops or beverages. So again, bring in water, or if you're staying at the hotel, have a cooler in your room. Normally I stay outside the event hall just because personally, I don't want to pay $250 a night for a room. So we'll go down the road a couple miles, and I leave a cooler of meats and sandwich stuff in the car. So when we're hungry, we're like, hey man, I'm going to go out to the car and make a sandwich. Um, I've also gone as far as ordering Grubhub and having them delivering it to my table inside the convention center, which is pretty cool.
That's
If you get
dope. I didn't think about that.
if you get the right person, they know what you're talking about, and they'll come right to your table and bring you your food. So, yeah,
That's cool. Tip
yeah,
that guy.
I did that 2 years ago, and that was the first time. I didn't think about doing it last year when we all went. But
So, coming in too, how important is glue? Do you bring glue and accelerant and like the green stuff? Where do you draw the line? Like, what hobby problems are you preparing for, and what are you just accepting happen?
so that's a good question. I do bring glue. I always have glue. I refuse to use accelerant. It does not do anything good for glue. It makes glue brittle, and if you touch it, you're gonna break it again anyway. So I stay away from any accelerants as far as quick dry and all that. And it can also affect your clear coats on your models and make them cloudy if you're depending on what kind of clear coats you're using. Um, so I typically stay away from that. I do, however, bring extra models. That way, in case something breaks in between. So, like I was saying, I have 120 demonettes in one of my lists. I bring an extra 10. That way, if some of them breaks and they blow up or snap off their bases, I can grab one and just flop them back over and say, okay, here's my replacement. I'll fix that guy later.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea to have is maybe a couple extra of each unit. Don't necessarily have to have it, but that also prevents you from having to eat up your valuable time in gluing models back together while playing on a chess clock.
Yeah. And another good point that came in for those that haven't been to Adepticon or other big tournaments before, whole package ballpark. What do you think it's going to cost? Like hotel, events, what on top of just bringing your army? What kind of financial implement?
So yeah, with as far as I'm close enough to drive. It's about 3.5 hours for me to drive. Um, it'll take me typically 3 tanks of gas, a tank to get there, a tank to when I hang out, go to the bars and get dinner throughout the week or the 4 or 5 days that I'm there, and a tank to get back home. So that's $150. Your room, if you're staying at the convention center, like I said, I think it was 250 this year. If you go outside, you could find them as low as, I think last year we got it at $90 a night. I mean, granted, it's not a great hotel, but all you're doing is crashing there for 4 or 5 hours and getting up and playing again. Because normally you're playing for 12 hours straight. You're going afterwards. You're getting some food. You're hanging out with the dudes until the bar closes, and then you're going back to the hotel and resting and doing it again the next day.
Yeah.
So and if you're playing, those rooms normally have two queen beds is I think what we normally get. So 5 or 4 or 5 days there, and you got 4 people in your room, you're paying $100. And then food on top of that. I mean, if you're going for the bare minimum, I think normally I get away with about $500. That's if I'm not spending anything extra. And that also includes like my badge and my one. And I normally don't include my event totals in there. That's normally paid for ahead of time. Like the badges, I normally I'll wait on the badges just because I'm not the person to get the VIGs and uh, the more expensive badges where you get a bunch of swag included. I have so much random stuff in my house right now. I don't need any more swag, so
And
I stay away from doing that.
and Yogi actually did use some of his channel points and like bolded a message here, but he he mentioned we mentioned earlier that the pads can give him high sportsmanship scores. What are other ways that you think about to get higher sportsmanship? And I think, excuse me, I had a little burp sneak up on me. If you, I think about it. Actually, the question in the opposite direction is that when I walk up to the table, I initially think that the person is good and like they lose sportsmanship scores from me the more that they're a dick. Like I start out with a 5. I don't make them have to prove to me that they're good, a good person. I start them at the good person role, and then they slowly do things that irk me to my
Yeah,
core.
so a lot of the larger events have more than like 3 notations as far as I'd play this guy again. It was a good game. I couldn't stand him, or it was just another game. There's normally just more than 3. There's, hey, this guy, best guy I've ever played. I would totally travel across the world to play this dude again. Things like that. So normally when I start out as you're getting, if there's 5 marks, you start out as a 4. Everybody's going to be a 4. You haven't proven, you're not going above and beyond. There's nothing that isn't besides the game. We're all here to play a game. We're not here to just expand. You know what I mean? If that makes any kind of sense with that. But like I definitely agree with if people are being dirty and playing dirty and treating you like you're not really there, they get lower. But as far as going above, I think any kind of having a good conversation throughout the whole thing is great. Somebody that remembers my name and not at the end when they're like, "Oh, hey man, what's your name again?" I mean, we're there for 3 hours and we're communicating. I think you should at least know the person's name that you're playing against, especially when you have your phone on you and you're playing in, you know, best goes pairing and all that, and you have your name of your opponent on your phone. You shouldn't need to ask your opponent their name. So that's one of my things. It's like, come on, man. Like, you weren't here the first 2 minutes we were here together. So yeah, and I think they need to be on time. They need to be ready. They need to have their rule stuff ready and available. Saying, hey, I've got a question on that stratagem. Can I see your book to read it? I don't care if it's on their phone, on a tablet, or if it's a hard copy of it, as long as they got it. I don't want to be like, oh, I forgot that at home. So those are things that I look for.
Yeah.
Um,
They also Yogi came up with the question of what's the most creative thing you've been given? Because a lot of the text in chat is Jester and Frostbite talking about cool stuff that they've been handed by opponents. Or I'll start it out with like one of the coolest things is at Gen Con I was given a bingo board of bad things that was going to happen to me during the game, and I was given candy for each bingo I completed. Like losing my warlord was on it. Um, like having 2 units killed in a single round. Losing a unit to smite spam, and it lessened the blow a little bit. Also, having my opponent not be a
It's
dingbat about it, but like it gave me a bunch of candy, and I ended that game. I had my warlord, which was an Imperial Guard like foot captain. I charged him in to die to get a last bingo, so that I could get like the some more rock candy from this guy. So it's like I don't know, you know that during the game you're gonna cause some level of feel badsies if you're gonna play right and you're gonna win. And this lessened that feel badsies because even in losing I felt like a little bit of a winner, you know?
yeah, yeah. So at Adepticon last year, round one, we played against the Tiki Gods, and as you got up to the table and introduced yourself, they put a Hawaiian lei on you, and then gave you a cup that was a different color for each team member, and it was a tiki mask on it. And whenever you ran out of your drink that they get provided, they'd refill it. I think it was definitely a lure to get you to play bad, as far as getting you a little too inebriated. But yeah, we take advantage of that because that's how Team Bad Decision works. But
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
we there's that. I've been given pint glasses. I've got several up in my display case that have different team logos on them. I have dice, wound counters, uh, victory point counters. I got some cool ones with custom gears uh, inside of them for different armies. So they're MDF cut, and the gears inside each work. I think there's 5 gears in each one, and as you turn it, the gears all spin, and they have different icons of different army factions in there, which are really cool. Um, I've been given T-shirts and swag, just about any kind of swag you can think of: T-shirts, hats, pins, your car decals, which are cool, things like that. Yeah, so people get creative. I think probably one of the best ones again was the Tiki Gods, but that was because that day became very cheap as far as having to pay for alcoholic beverages
Oh yeah,
or adult beverages.
I wasn't even playing in the team tournament. I was just kind of running around helping you guys, and I drank some of the Tiki God's drink, and then I had to go take a nap in the room.
It was strong,
And yeah,
and but it was so smooth. And I think the problem is I don't think they realized who they were giving the cups to, because I mean, this was round one when we played them, and we went through almost a third of their whole supply for the 2 day event. Yeah.
yeah, we go hard.
For
Yeah,
one game, it was
we're not.
it was really bad. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe we've gone through 3/5 of alcohol so far." I'm like, "Oh, that's a lot for 8 people, but let's keep going."
Yeah, yeah, we are not there to like competitively beat a whole bunch of face. So
No, we go there for soft scores.
yeah, yeah, cool. Just a little recap. We are Team Bad Decisions. We are talking about today, or have talked about for almost 2 hours now, like Adepticon tournaments, seeing the mission packets and how the mission packets could influence list building. This is Competitive Corner, which is our Monday show. Our Friday show around the same time, 4:30 to 6:30 is a lore-based show with a little bit of list building in there, and our Saturday show is Hobby Time, which is leaning more towards the hobby aspects of the game, with a little bit of lore and a little bit of fun stuff in there. I'm Brandon, a team member of the team, and This is Eric, or actually from the other direction. Eric is with me. He's more of our competitive. I don't know. Would you say the competitive side of our team's gamers? But you're definitely
I
the
would,
most
yeah, I would say
decorated.
out of the team members we have, I think I'm probably one of the more competitive. I think that the competitive people that we have had have kind of toned down a bit. But yeah, I definitely am more up on meta and facing meta, working with meta, how to play against it, and making it work to your advantage.
Yeah. So we appreciate you guys all watching, but we're gonna be wrapping up here. So just to thank people that liked or followed or anything. We just had one follow since the last show, and it was Tiger Lucky Charms. So Tiger Lucky Charms, thank you. You're awesome, and your name is awesome. We appreciate you. Uh, so everybody, while you're out there, I think I'll throw up a little bit of reruns after this show, just in case you missed the beginning of it. Feel free to catch that. But stay safe, guys, and game on. Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks, everyone.
Uh, thank you. Thank you a ton for coming out.